Alright, let's get this out of the way early on. I am not transgender. I am a cisgendered man. I've been this way my entire life. However, being a man doesn't really come with any sort of instruction manual or anything. We just kind of have to pick it up as we go along. No one teaches you this. And honestly, even after 26 years of this shit, I still don't know what's going on half the time. I've been doing this since the day I was born, and it's only recently that I've learned some of these lessons, and I assume I'll continue learning more and more as time goes on. So I imagine if you are a trans man and you are just recently starting to be perceived as a man in public and in private, or if you have been one for a while, you're still behind the curve. So I figured, why not? Let's make this video about just what it's like to be a man, and if you are transitioning, or if you're thinking about transitioning or anything, then these are some things you need to know about. And I should say, this is not me trying to like scare you out of transitioning or anything. Like, you should do that if that's what makes you happy. I'm just saying that this is the sort of thing you should expect, and this is the sort of thing you should prepare yourself for. I'm also not doing it to try and like get a one-up on the feminists, like a feminist-owned compilation number 18,1204 or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying, like, as a man, these are some of the things you're going to run into. Be prepared for that, and don't be too surprised when it happens, because it can really slap you in the face when it does. So, number one, you need to keep in mind that everyone fears you. Just everyone. Like, if you're walking on a road at nighttime and there's another person there, they will try to avoid you. Like, especially women, for obvious reasons. Like, again, if you're a trans man, you've spent some time living as a woman. And so, yes, you are afraid of strange men out in public. I understand that, and, you can't really blame anyone for it. But other men are also going to be wary of you. It's not like we walk around totally safe, totally oblivious, and not thinking about anything bad that could ever happen. Like, the majority of victims of violent crimes are men. And the majority of perpetrators are as well, but that's beside the point. Like, if you're out in public or even in private, people are going to treat you warily. People will fear violence from you, whether it's physical violence or sexual violence. Like, you are viewed as a predator of sorts. Even if you don't kill them, you could still easily hurt them. Like, I look like this, and I get this kind of treatment out and about. Like, imagine how much worse it is if you're just tall, or just a big dude, or you have a beard and a bunch of tattoos and a shaved head so you look like a biker. Like, it is an unfortunate fact. That's just how it works. And you can see this rhetoric not just from, women, but from men as well. Like, all the rhetoric around trans people right now is largely focused on trans women, and everyone on the far right of the political spectrum seems to view them as, like, not actually being women, as being men, and most of the fear-mongering about them is about how they are sexual predators, how they're trying to come after children, trying to come after women in dressing rooms, that sort of thing. Like, you are always seen as a threat. Like, if you are a woman and you see a man out and about with another woman, whether that's like his sister or his girlfriend or whoever else, like, you're probably going to think of him as being a little, I don't know, safer. Like, that's you saying, okay, this guy is cool, he's not an immediate danger to me, as opposed to him being alone. And, I mean, if I'm wrong on that, feel free to correct me, but from what I've seen, that is how it works. But if you're a man and you see a man and his significant other out, the calculus changes quite a bit. In fact, it's the exact opposite. He could be more dangerous, because what if he thinks I'm trying to check out his girl? What if he thinks that he wants to show off in front of her? Like, things can get violent. Like, sometimes people just do stupid shit because they see you as a threat. There are a lot of reasons why there aren't a lot of men who work in certain fields, like childcare is probably a big one, or early childhood education. And this idea that men are dangerous predators is just one of the big ones. Like, a man trying to work as an elementary school teacher, I wish there were more of them, but there's very few out there, and part of the reason for that is that people just kind of don't want them. The number two thing you should be aware of as a man is that judgment is harsh and constant. I'm not saying that it's not there for women as well, but I mean men based on, like, your physical appearance, your professional success, or lack thereof, how you decide to display your emotions, how you decide to express yourself in any way. Like, people will hone in on that, and they have no qualms about being just brutal towards you. I mean, think about it for a second. If you're a teenage girl or a woman who's really into stuff that is generally thought of as masculine, like you're into, I don't know, bloody horror movies, or you're really young and you like playing with G.I. Joes or something, some people will think that's a little odd, but generally speaking, no one's going to care that much. Whereas if you're a grown man who's into like romance novels or sugary pop music or anything else that's generally thought of as like girl stuff, or especially if you're a young boy who likes playing with girl stuff like Barbie dolls or anything like that, people will actually get violent over that in some cases. Like, not very often, but people will hate you. People will just think so much less of you instantly. And again, they won't just keep this to themselves usually. They will come right out and say it. And this goes for all sorts of stuff. Like, if you're a man who can't find much professional success, doesn't make a lot of money, can't have a great job and support your family or whatever, you're seen as a failure. Whereas if you're a woman that can't do that, then people generally think that sucks, but they feel more sympathy for you than anything. And again, if we're talking physical appearance, like, there is this general stigma around just being very direct and calling a woman ugly or critiquing anything specific about her body or appearance or anything like that, that just doesn't exist for men. Like, you can call a man fat, but you can't really do that for women without facing some severe repercussions, at least socially speaking. Like, people will generally think of you as an asshole and not like you. I mean, hell, not long ago, there were people making fun of James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, because he's starting to go bald. I'm like, well, he's in his 40s. Like, sometimes that happens. It sucks, but it does sometimes happen. And they're just making fun of him for just getting older, basically. But imagine for a moment if someone took like a woman who's famous on the internet or somewhat famous on the internet and pointed out that she's getting wrinkles or getting gray hair, and they tried making fun of that. People would not take that as well as they took the abuse of James Rolfe. Like, there's just this idea that you can be so much harsher and so much meaner to men because, like, we're equipped for it, or we can take it, or something like that. But whatever the reasoning is, judgment in all areas of your life is going to be harsh. It will be constant, and people do not pull their punches with this. Number 3, I tried to think of a couple of different ways to word this, but eventually I just decided to go with sex equals bad. And I mean that in several ways. Like, a couple of months ago, I did a video talking about how women are just bad at sex, and to summarize that, most heterosexual women, when they're with men, they have this idea that just making themselves available is all they need to do. Like, sex is something that's done to them and not something they participate in. And so as a result, they're really lazy. But again, like I said last time, judgment is harsh. So, like, if they can't finish, that's your fault. And if you can't finish, that's also your fault. Like, that sort of thing. I don't want to go on too long about that because I've already said my thoughts on it. And I don't take any of that back, by the way. Like, I've had some people mad at me for that video. I stand by everything I said. It's 100% true. But on top of that, you're seen as kind of a bad person because you're seen as someone who just solely wants sex all the time, and that's the main thing you think about. And it's not that these sorts of people don't exist or that there aren't men who have like a hyperfixation on sex and stuff, because obviously a lot of them do. But there's this pervasive idea in both like really conservative ideologies and conservative religious cultures and all that, and in more modern progressive ones, that men are just constantly horn dogs, and again, that sex is something that is done to women rather than something they participate in. Like, do you ever wonder why there are so many religious conservatives, especially the farther back you go, that have this idea that men are just expected to be constantly horny and to be tempted by this smoldering temptress that comes out? Like, I mean, I'm thinking right now of Count Frollo or Judge Frollo, whatever the hell his name is, from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and how it was like Esmeralda's fault because this is viewed as like just the default state that men are in all the time, and so it's up to women basically to not poke the bear, as it were. Like, again, were seen as a threat. It's like if someone finds a sleeping bear, goes up to it and like throws rocks at it or something, and the bear attacks them, that's their fault. That's not the bear's fault. And that's basically how they view men and our sexuality. Like, there's a reason, again, that so many conservative religious movements have this idea that, like, oh, you need to cover your hair, you harlot, otherwise you will awaken desire in men, and then whatever happens next is your fault. That's where the whole what were you wearing idea comes from. And because of this idea that men are just generally thought of to be perverts and just constantly horny and all that, there's this unspoken expectation that we have to keep all that under wraps. Like, I mean, again, in more conservative ideologies, more conservative cultures, it's, again, they try and put it on the women, but in more progressive, enlightened ones, however you want to put that, the onus is put on men. They still have that idea that we are constantly horny and that we are just basically a dog pulling at the chain, ready to get loose and attack somebody. But the onus is put on us to keep that under control instead of on them. And, I mean, I'm not going to say that's like a better way of doing it, but again, it's this idea of like, okay, if you show any sexual desire at all, in many cases, that's seen as a bad thing. You're seen as a bad person with no self-control. And I'm not talking about like, sexually assaulting someone or anything. I'm just talking about generally being horny, especially with young boys who are, hitting puberty and just starting to get the sexual desire. Like, there's this idea out there that, like, when you're in that stage, that is when you need to learn to stamp all these down and keep a lid on them and only be able to bring it out during very specific times. And sometimes you don't know what's the right time to bring that out and let someone know that you are interested in them sexually or anything like that. There's a reason that the Madonna whore complex became a thing, and that's because some men, when they stamp these feelings down, they aren't really able to bring them back up except under very specific circumstances. Number 4 is admittedly a smaller one, and I have less to say about it, but there's just no physical touch, ever. Like, you can shake people's hands, you can high-five them, and if they're, like, your female relative or something, you can hug them, and that's about it. Other than, obviously, with your romantic partner, then you have sex and cuddles and stuff. But other than that, people just do not touch you. Like, ever. And maybe that's a little more sanitary, I don't know. But it is not pleasant. Like, just try and go months at a time without ever making contact with another human being and never feeling how warm it is when you hug somebody, and you'll start to realize, man, this is not fun. This shit sucks. Like, if you ever get to the point where you like hug someone or you have sex or something and you're like shocked at, oh yeah, other people are warm, then you know what it's like for a lot of men. And number 5, this one kind of ties into all the others, so I figured I'd save it for last, and that is, you are expendable. People do not care about you. They don't care about your well-being. They don't care about your physical well-being. They don't care about your emotional well-being. They just straight up don't care about you. You are a cog in a machine. You are a tool. You are a part that can be replaced. There's a lot of spaces in which this applies, like whether you're a miner that has to go down and dig for hours and hours a day and then get black lung and maybe die in a collapse because you're the owner of the mine decided to cut corners somewhere, or whether you're a soldier who gets sent off to fight in some capitalist's war to make more money, and then you get shot and either die or come back and you're disabled and no one cares about you, so they just let you be yet another homeless veteran on the streets, where they'll only mention you when they're trying to screw over somebody else. Like, hey, maybe we should forgive student loan debt. Let's give that money to homeless veterans instead. Okay, let's give it to them instead. No, that's socialism. Like, that sort of thing. They will only bring you out when you can be used as a prop to attack other people. If you are a man, there is a very real chance that at some point your government will come up to you and, on pain of imprisonment or death, force you to pick up a gun and go fight and kill other people. And if you refuse to do that, again, you'll be lucky to just get prison. If you're unlucky, they will shoot you in the head and bury you in a ditch. And it could also be non-governmental forces, depending on just how shit it is. Like, there are places where people just roll up into your village and take you. You could be like 10 or 12 years old, and you are just seen as a warm body that can fight in their wars for them. That is not something women have to deal with. When a ship sinks, who gets to leave first? Well, women and children first, because they're more valuable. They're more important. Men get whatever's left over. You know, the lifeboats, if there's any room, we can go, but it's not okay for us to take up space meant for more important people. You know, like, if you're talking about, like, war crimes or something, people are considered particularly heinous if they kill women and children. Like, men, even if they're not combatants, are just not seen as that big a deal if you kill them. Men who abuse their children or their romantic partners are seen as, like, absolute scum, lowest of the low, and not without reason. I'm not trying to defend those guys by any means. But women who do the same thing, people don't necessarily like them, but they're much more willing to make excuses for them, and they're much more willing to just think, oh, she's kind of crazy, we'll stay away from her, rather than hating her. In a lot of situations, you are replaceable, you are expendable, and so they don't really care about you for that reason. Like, women are seen as, again, this is not a great thing, but women are often seen as, like, just broodmares. You know, they can produce the next generation of, like, workers or soldiers or whatever else you need. Men really can't. Or, I mean, I guess they still need men to do that, but it's much easier for one man to impregnate, like, 40 women than the other way around. Like, so you don't need that many men to continue things. You just don't. I think I could talk for hours about this overall, but I really just wanted to make this short and quick. It wound up being longer than I intended, but yeah, those are a couple of things you need to know if you're becoming a man. And I guess this advice could also apply if you're just a young boy growing up into manhood. But yeah, shit kind of sucks sometimes. People just don't care about you, and there's a lot of unfair expectations. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't apply to women as well, because obviously it does. Patriarchal gender norms hurt everybody. But this is the sort of thing that you need to be aware of. And, I mean, there's not really a fix for it. Like, the only thing I can think of to help you deal with this is, well, I can just quote Kratos and say, close your heart to it. That's all. Goodbye.